The champagne glass slipped from my hands as James Richardson's voice carried across the entire wedding reception. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet the chairman of Elevate Digital Solutions, the brilliant mind behind our company's digital transformation. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned. My brother Tyler's jaw dropped as he stared at me in complete shock. Still wearing his tuxedo from the ceremony where I'd just spent the last 3 hours serving drinks to his guests like hired help. My mother's face went pale as she processed what she'd just heard, and my father nearly choked on his bourbon. The same daughter they'd deemed too technical and not business-minded enough to invest in was being introduced to a room full of Chicago's elite as the successful entrepreneur who'd just saved Richardson Industries millions of dollars. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Now let me tell you how a wedding day that started with family humiliation became the moment that changed everything about how my loved ones saw me forever. My name is Sarah Martinez, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the daughter who was supposed to be grateful for whatever scraps of attention came my way. Growing up in our comfortable suburban home in Wheaton, Illinois, I learned early that being smart wasn't enough if you weren't also charming. Being responsible wasn't valued if you weren't also spontaneous. Being analytical was seen as a limitation rather than a strength, especially when your younger brother Tyler possessed the kind of effortless charisma that made adults light up the moment he walked into any room. Tyler had always been the golden child, the one whose report cards were celebrated even when his grades were mediocre, whose sports teams were attended religiously, even when he spent most games warming the bench, whose casual jokes at dinner became family legends retold at every gathering. He was 2 years younger than me, but somehow always felt like the older sibling in our parents' eyes, the one whose opinions mattered more, whose future seemed brighter, whose potential was limitless, while mine was cautiously managed. I discovered early that academic achievement was expected rather than celebrated in our household. When I brought home straight A's throughout high school, the response was a satisfied nod and a reminder not to let success go to my head. When Tyler scraped by with C's and B's, it was proof of his well-rounded personality and evidence that he was focused on developing his social skills for future business success. The message was clear: intelligence was fine, but personality was power. This dynamic followed us through college, where I studied marketing at Northwestern University while Tyler pursued communications at a smaller state school closer to home. I spent my undergraduate years immersed in case studies and internships, learning about consumer behavior and digital trends, building a foundation for what I hoped would become a meaningful career. Tyler spent his college years perfecting his networking skills, joining the right fraternities, making connections that our parents insisted would serve him well in whatever business venture he eventually pursued. The disparity in our treatment became most obvious during family gatherings, where Tyler's stories about campus social events and spring break adventures were met with delighted laughter, while my accounts of marketing research projects and academic achievements were politely acknowledged before the conversation moved on to more entertaining topics. I learned to keep my accomplishments to myself, to downplay my grades and internship offers, to make space for Tyler's personality to shine without my achievements casting any shadows. After graduation, I moved to a small apartment in Lincoln Park and started working for a mid-sized marketing firm downtown. The job was everything I'd hoped for: challenging and creative, working with clients to develop digital strategies that actually moved the needle on their business results. I was good at it, really good, staying late to perfect campaigns and spending weekends researching emerging social media trends that could benefit our clients. Within 18 months, I'd been promoted twice and was managing accounts that generated significant revenue for the agency. But success in corporate marketing only reinforced my growing frustration with the limitations of working for someone else's vision. I watched senior executives make decisions based on outdated assumptions about digital consumer behavior, saw innovative campaign ideas get watered down by committee consensus, witnessed smaller clients get deprioritized in favor of larger accounts that generated bigger fees but often less creative satisfaction. The entrepreneurial itch that had been developing throughout college grew stronger with each passing month. The idea for Elevate Digital Solutions crystallized during a particularly frustrating week when 3 different clients approached me directly with projects that fell outside my agency's scope. They needed comprehensive digital marketing support for their small businesses, everything from social media strategy to website development to e-commerce integration. But my employer wasn't interested in smaller accounts that required more hands-on attention. I realized there was a significant gap in the market between expensive full-service agencies that only worked with large corporations and cheap freelancers who lacked the strategic expertise to drive real business results. I spent months developing a business plan that would position Elevate Digital Solutions as the premium choice for small and medium-sized businesses, ready to invest seriously in their digital presence. The model was straightforward. Provide Fortune 500-level marketing strategy and execution at a price point accessible to smaller companies, with a focus on measurable results and long-term growth, rather than quick fixes or superficial social media management. The research was exhaustive. I analyzed competitor pricing structures, surveyed potential customers about their pain points with existing marketing solutions, developed financial projections based on conservative growth assumptions, and created detailed timelines for everything from client acquisition to team expansion. By the time I'd finished the business plan, I had a document that outlined exactly how $50,000 in startup capital would be transformed into a sustainable, profitable business within 18 months. The challenge was funding. My savings from 2 years of corporate work were substantial enough to cover basic living expenses for a few months, but nowhere near sufficient to launch a business that required professional website development, marketing software subscriptions, initial advertising spend, and enough runway to survive the inevitable slow months that come with any new venture. I needed investment, and despite my complicated relationship with my family's attention patterns, I knew they were my most logical first option. My parents had always preached the importance of financial security and smart investment decisions. Dad worked as a regional manager for a pharmaceutical company, a stable job that had provided our family with a comfortable middle-class lifestyle throughout my childhood. Mom had returned to substitute teaching when Tyler and I were in high school, partly for the additional income but mostly to maintain her professional identity and social connections within our community. They were careful savers who had managed to build substantial retirement accounts and emergency funds despite never earning particularly high salaries. More importantly, they had a track record of supporting Tyler's financial requests with remarkable generosity. When he'd wanted to study abroad during his junior year of college, they'd covered the additional expenses without hesitation. When he'd needed a reliable car after graduation to support his job search, they'd helped with the down payment and signed the loan. When he'd expressed interest in pursuing a sales position that required professional wardrobe upgrades and networking event attendance, they'd provided what he called a career development fund to cover those expenses. The pattern was clear. When Tyler needed financial support to pursue opportunities, our parents found ways to make it happen. They believed in his potential and were willing to invest in his success, even when the returns were uncertain or the timeline was vague. I assumed this same supportive approach would extend to my business proposal, especially given the thoroughness of my preparation and the strength of my track record in the marketing industry. I scheduled the conversation for a Sunday afternoon in late March, choosing the familiar setting of our family dining room, where so many important discussions had taken place over the years. Mom had prepared her signature pot roast, and the house carried the comforting aromas of home-cooked food that always made our childhood memories feel more accessible. I arrived with a professionally bound presentation, complete with market research, financial projections, competitive analysis, and detailed implementation timelines that demonstrated exactly how their investment would be utilized. Dad settled into his usual chair at the head of the table, adjusting his reading glasses as he began flipping through the comprehensive business plan I'd spent months perfecting. Mom moved between the kitchen and dining room, occasionally glancing over his shoulder to examine the charts and graphs I'd carefully crafted to illustrate Elevate Digital Solutions' market opportunity and growth potential. The late afternoon sunlight filtered through the windows we'd cleaned together countless times during my childhood, creating the same warm atmosphere that had always made our house feel like a safe haven. Tyler wasn't present for this initial presentation, having moved back home temporarily while he searched for the right sales position and saved money for his own apartment. His absence was actually a relief, allowing me to focus entirely on making my case without the distracting dynamic of sibling comparison that had colored so many family conversations throughout our lives. "This is really impressive work, sweetheart," Mom said after I'd finished walking them through the executive summary and market analysis. "You've clearly put a tremendous amount of thought into every aspect of the business." Her tone carried genuine admiration for the level of detail and professional presentation, and I felt a surge of hope that this conversation might unfold differently than I'd allowed myself to expect. Dad nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful as he continued reviewing the financial projections. "The research is certainly thorough," he agreed. "You've identified a real market opportunity, and your background gives you credibility with potential clients." He paused, removing his glasses to clean them with the methodical precision that characterized most of his decision-making processes. "But Sarah, starting a business is incredibly challenging, and the failure rates for new companies are sobering." I'd anticipated this concern, so I launched into the explanation I'd rehearsed about risk mitigation strategies and conservative growth assumptions. "That's exactly why I've been so careful with the planning," I replied, leaning forward with enthusiasm. "I'm not asking you to fund some untested concept. This business model has been validated by my experience at the agency, and I've already had preliminary conversations with potential clients who've expressed serious interest." $50,000 is a significant amount of money, Dad continued, his tone becoming more cautious as the conversation progressed. "That represents a substantial portion of our discretionary savings, money we've set aside for emergencies and retirement planning." The shift in his demeanor was subtle but unmistakable, moving from interested evaluation to protective concern about financial exposure. "I understand that. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us." Now back to the story. "Completely," I said, trying to maintain my confident tone while addressing his underlying anxiety. "But this isn't a gift or a loan that might never be repaid. I'm offering you equity in Elevate Digital Solutions. When the business succeeds, you'll see returns on your investment that could significantly enhance your retirement portfolio." The silence that followed felt heavier than I'd expected, filled with unspoken communication between my parents that seemed to exclude me entirely from their decision-making process. Mom glanced at Dad with an expression I couldn't quite decipher, something that suggested they'd already discussed this possibility before I'd even presented my formal proposal. "Honey, we absolutely believe in your capabilities," Mom said carefully, her words chosen with the diplomatic precision she'd perfected during years of navigating school board meetings and parent-teacher conferences. "You're incredibly smart and hardworking, and we're proud of everything you've accomplished in your career so far." The word "but" hung in the air even though she hadn't spoken it yet, and I braced myself for whatever qualification was coming next. "But the digital marketing industry is extremely competitive," Dad said, picking up the thread of Mom's diplomatic introduction. "You'd be going up against established agencies with decades of experience and much deeper financial resources. A small startup would face enormous challenges trying to compete for clients in such a saturated market. The market research shows there's actually significant demand for the specific services I'd be offering," I replied, trying to keep the defensive edge out of my voice. "Small businesses are underserved by the current options available. They can't afford the big agencies, but they need more sophisticated strategy than freelancers typically provide." "Market research can be misleading," Dad interrupted, his tone gentle but firm. "What looks promising on paper often proves much more difficult in practice. The reality of building a sustainable business is more complex than any projection can capture." I felt my carefully maintained composure beginning to crack as the conversation continued. Every point I raised was met with cautious skepticism. Every piece of evidence I provided was countered with general concerns about risk and uncertainty. The same parents who had enthusiastically supported Tyler's various financial requests were treating my thoroughly researched business proposal like a reckless gamble that threatened their fundamental security. "So you won't even consider it?" I asked, the words coming out sharper than I'd intended. The professional presentation I'd spent months preparing suddenly felt like an exercise in futility. Hundreds of hours of research and planning reduced to a polite rejection based on vague concerns about market competition. "It's not that we won't consider it," Mom said quickly, reaching across the table to touch my hand in a gesture that felt more condescending than comforting. "We just think you should gain more experience in the corporate world before taking on the risks of entrepreneurship. There's nothing wrong with working for someone else while you learn more about business operations." "I've been learning about business operations my entire life," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to maintain professional composure. "I've worked every summer since I was 16, graduated at the top of my class, earned 2 promotions in less than 2 years, and developed expertise that clients specifically request. What more experience could I possibly need? Experience and success as an employee don't necessarily translate to success as a business owner, Dad replied, his tone carrying the patient authority he'd used when explaining complex topics during my childhood. Managing clients, handling financial responsibilities, building a customer base, dealing with legal and tax obligations. These are completely different challenges from excelling in a corporate marketing role. The conversation continued for another 30 minutes, but the outcome had been determined within the first 10. Every strategic advantage I outlined was met with skeptical questions about sustainability. Every success metric I proposed was countered with concerns about market volatility. Every piece of evidence supporting demand for my services was dismissed with general warnings about the difficulties of entrepreneurship. As I gathered my presentation materials with hands that trembled slightly from frustration and disappointment, I couldn't help but think about all the times Tyler's requests had been met with immediate enthusiasm and creative problem-solving. When he'd needed funding for study abroad, they'd found ways to make it work. When he'd wanted a car, they'd researched financing options. When he'd asked for career development support, they'd provided it without requiring detailed business plans or risk assessments. "I thought you believed in me," I said quietly as I prepared to leave, the words carrying more pain than I'd intended to reveal. "We do believe in you," Mom insisted, her voice full of the kind of earnest sincerity that somehow made the rejection feel worse rather than better. "That's exactly why we want you to take a safer path. You have too much potential to risk it on something so uncertain." The drive back to my Lincoln Park apartment felt longer than usual, giving me plenty of time to process the sting of disappointment and the growing realization that my parents' support would always come with conditions that seemed to apply only to me. Tyler's dreams were worth investing in because they involved traditional markers of success like networking and relationship building. My dreams were too risky because they required actual business acumen and strategic thinking. But what hurt more than the financial rejection was the implicit message beneath their careful diplomatic language. They didn't see me as someone capable of building something meaningful from scratch. They saw me as someone who needed the security of working for other people's visions. Someone whose talents were best utilized in supporting roles rather than leadership positions. That night, I sat in my small apartment surrounded by the business plan documents that represented months of work and careful planning, feeling more determined than ever to prove that their assessment of my capabilities was fundamentally wrong. If they wouldn't invest in my vision, I'd find someone who would. If they couldn't see the potential in Elevate Digital Solutions, I'd build it into something so successful that their initial rejection would become an obvious mistake. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but it would be entirely mine to shape and control. And someday, when Elevate Digital Solutions was thriving and generating the kind of success I'd projected in those carefully researched financial models, my parents would have to confront the reality that their careful, conservative approach had caused them to miss out on supporting something genuinely valuable. Little did I know that the real test of our family dynamics was still ahead, and it would come at Tyler's wedding in ways that none of us could have anticipated. The rejection from my parents marked the beginning of what I would later recognize as the most transformative period of my professional life. Instead of accepting their assessment of my business prospects, I channeled my disappointment into a relentless pursuit of alternative funding options. The corporate marketing job that had once felt like a stepping stone now became a strategic resource, providing steady income while I rebuilt my entrepreneurial strategy from scratch. I spent my lunch breaks researching small business loans, my evenings attending networking events downtown, and my weekends meeting with potential mentors who might provide both guidance and financial connections. The Chicago entrepreneurship community was larger and more supportive than I'd realized, filled with successful business owners who remembered their own struggles with initial funding and were surprisingly willing to share advice with someone who demonstrated genuine preparation and commitment. It was at a Northwestern University alumni mixer in downtown Chicago that I first met David Chen, a venture capitalist who specialized in supporting early-stage marketing technology companies. Unlike my parents, who had focused primarily on potential risks and market challenges, David immediately grasped the strategic opportunity that Elevate Digital Solutions represented in the evolving digital landscape. "The small business market is completely underserved right now," he said over coffee at a bustling cafe in the Loop, reviewing my business plan with the kind of analytical attention I'd hoped to receive from my family. You're positioning yourself perfectly between the overpriced agencies that small businesses can't afford and the inexperienced freelancers who can't deliver enterprise-level strategy. David's questions were sharp and challenging, but they came from a place of genuine interest in understanding how to make the business successful, rather than finding reasons why it might fail. He wanted to know about customer acquisition costs, lifetime value projections, competitive differentiation strategies, and scalability timelines. These were exactly the kinds of strategic discussions I'd prepared for, conversations about building sustainable growth rather than simply avoiding risk. "What kind of investment are you seeking?" he asked after 2 hours of detailed business plan review and strategic discussion. "$50,000 for 30% equity," I replied, offering the same terms I'd proposed to my parents but with a slightly higher equity percentage, to reflect the additional value that David's expertise and industry connections would bring to the company. "That's reasonable for a seed-stage investment," David nodded, making notes in the margins of my financial projections. "The numbers are conservative enough to be achievable but ambitious enough to generate meaningful returns. I'll need to conduct some additional due diligence, but I'm definitely interested in moving forward." 3 weeks later, David Chen became the founding investor in Elevate Digital Solutions. The legal paperwork was straightforward, the terms were fair, and for the first time since graduating from Northwestern, I felt like someone with business experience had truly believed in my vision for building something meaningful in the digital marketing space. Meanwhile, Tyler's life continued its charmed trajectory with family support that seemed to flow effortlessly in his direction. While I was grinding through the complex process of securing business funding and navigating legal incorporation requirements, Tyler was enjoying what our parents generously termed his quote, exploration phase. This exploration was being funded through a combination of continued living at home, regular financial supplements for professional development activities, and a substantial gift that would soon dwarf any investment I'd requested. The family dinner where I learned about Tyler's latest windfall took place just weeks after I'd successfully secured David's investment and officially launched Elevate Digital Solutions. I'd been working 18-hour days to establish foundational business systems, develop marketing materials, and begin the client acquisition process that would determine whether my carefully researched business plan would translate into sustainable revenue. "Tyler has some exciting news to share," Mom announced as we gathered around the familiar dining room table, her voice carrying the kind of anticipatory pride that I'd learned to recognize as the prelude to another celebration of my brother's latest achievement or opportunity. "I've been accepted into the management training program at Richardson Motors," Tyler announced, his characteristic confidence undimmed by the fact that this was actually his 4th job opportunity in the past year, the previous 3 having ended due to various conflicts with supervisors or dissatisfaction with advancement timelines. Richardson Motors was the largest luxury car dealership in the western suburbs, known for catering to affluent clients and maintaining a sales culture that emphasized relationship building and long-term customer development. It was exactly the kind of environment where Tyler's natural charisma and networking abilities could theoretically flourish, assuming he could maintain focus and professional consistency for longer than his previous positions had required. "That's wonderful," I said, genuinely happy that he'd found something that aligned with his strengths, even while wondering internally about the longevity of his enthusiasm once the initial excitement wore off. "The best part is the earning potential," Tyler continued, warming to his favorite topic of financial opportunity. "The top salespeople there make 6 figures within their first few years. It's all about building relationships with the right clients and understanding what drives luxury purchasing decisions." Dad nodded approvingly, clearly impressed by Tyler's description of the opportunity and its potential for substantial income generation. "Relationship building has always been your strength," he agreed. "This seems like a perfect fit for your personality and skills." "There is one thing, though," Tyler said, his tone shifting slightly as he prepared to make some kind of request that would require family support. "The management training program requires a significant investment in professional development, business attire, networking event participation, client entertainment capabilities, the kind of things that demonstrate commitment to the luxury market." I could see where this conversation was heading, and the familiar pattern of Tyler's requests being met with immediate problem-solving rather than skeptical risk assessment. The same parents who had spent an hour explaining why my thoroughly researched business plan was too risky for a $50,000 investment were about to fund Tyler's vaguely defined professional development needs without requiring detailed financial projections or market analysis. "How much are we talking about?" Mom asked, her tone suggesting curiosity rather than concern about the financial implications. "Probably around $75,000, Tyler replied casually, as if he were discussing lunch plans rather than a substantial financial commitment. "Professional wardrobe, reliable luxury vehicle for client meetings, membership in the right networking organizations, entertainment budget for building relationships, that kind of investment in success. $75,000. 50% more than I'd requested for launching an entire business with detailed revenue projections and conservative growth assumptions." Tyler was asking for more money than I'd needed to launch Elevate Digital Solutions, and he was asking for it to support a sales job that he might or might not maintain once the initial novelty wore off. "That is a significant amount," Dad mused, but his tone suggested thoughtful consideration rather than the immediate skepticism that had characterized his response to my business proposal. "But investment in professional development often pays dividends throughout an entire career." "Exactly," Tyler agreed enthusiastically. "This isn't just about one job. It's about establishing myself in the luxury market and building the kind of network that creates opportunities for years to come. The people who buy luxury cars often own businesses, invest in real estate, make decisions about major purchases. Building relationships with them now could open doors I can't even imagine yet." The conversation that followed was surreal in its contrast to the careful risk assessment that had characterized my parents' response to Elevate Digital Solutions. The same people who had lectured me about market saturation and established competitors were now enthusiastically discussing Tyler's entry into one of the most competitive sales environments in the automotive industry. The same parents who had expressed concerns about failure rates and business sustainability were excited about investing in Tyler's relationship-building potential. "Let us talk about it and get back to you," Dad said, but his tone suggested affirmation rather than extended deliberation. 2 weeks later, Tyler announced that our parents had agreed to provide the full $75,000 he'd requested, structured as a gift rather than a loan or equity investment. The money would cover a luxury vehicle lease, professional wardrobe expansion, country club membership, and what Mom described as a relationship-building fund for entertaining potential clients and networking with industry contacts. The news reached me through a cheerful phone call from Mom, who seemed genuinely excited about Tyler's professional prospects and completely oblivious to the stark contrast between their enthusiastic support for his career development and their cautious rejection of my business investment proposal. "We're so proud of Tyler for taking such a strategic approach to his career," she explained, apparently forgetting that strategic planning had been exactly what she'd claimed to value about my business proposal before ultimately deciding it was too risky to support. "That's wonderful," I replied, keeping my voice neutral while processing the emotional complexity of watching my parents invest significantly more money in Tyler's vaguely defined relationship-building strategy than they'd been willing to risk on my carefully researched business plan. "Of course we're proud of you too," Mom added quickly, perhaps sensing some tension in my response. "How is your little marketing business doing?" Little marketing business. 3 months after launching Elevate Digital Solutions with David Chen's investment and guidance, I'd already signed contracts with 6 clients, generated enough revenue to cover my apartment rent and basic living expenses, and developed a reputation within Chicago's small business community for delivering measurable results that justified premium pricing. But to my family, it remained a little marketing business that deserved polite acknowledgement rather than genuine celebration. The irony wasn't lost on me that Tyler's $75,000 gift for relationship building in the luxury car market was being celebrated as strategic career investment, while my $50,000 business loan for launching an actual company was still viewed as a risky venture that probably wouldn't succeed. The double standard was so obvious that I wondered whether my parents were even aware of their contradictory responses to our respective financial requests. But I'd learned something valuable from their rejection. External validation wasn't necessary for internal confidence. David Chen's investment had provided more than funding. It had confirmed that my business instincts were sound and my market analysis was accurate. Elevate Digital Solutions was succeeding because the strategy was solid, not because my family believed in it. 6 months later, my client base had expanded to 12 businesses, my monthly revenue consistently exceeded my living expenses, and I'd hired Maya Patel as my first full-time employee. Maya brought social media expertise and graphic design skills that complemented my strategic marketing background, allowing us to offer comprehensive digital solutions that smaller businesses couldn't access from traditional agencies. The success wasn't happening in isolation. Chicago's small business community was tightly connected, and satisfied clients consistently referred new prospects who had heard about the measurable results we were delivering. Restaurant owners were seeing increased foot traffic from targeted social media campaigns. E-commerce companies were achieving better conversion rates through website optimization strategies. Service-based businesses were attracting higher quality leads through content marketing approaches that positioned them as industry experts. Tyler's career at Richardson Motors was following a more predictable trajectory. The initial enthusiasm had carried him through the first few months of training and client relationship development, but the sustained effort required for luxury car sales was proving more challenging than he'd anticipated. The networking opportunities were certainly abundant, but converting social connections into actual sales required persistence and follow-through that didn't align naturally with his preferred working style. I learned about Tyler's professional struggles through family dinner conversations, where his initial optimism was gradually replaced by complaints about difficult customers, unfair sales territories, and management expectations that didn't recognize his relationship-building investments. The $75,000 career development fund had been spent within the first 6 months, but the anticipated returns were slower to materialize than anyone had projected. The luxury car market is really challenging right now, Tyler explained during one particularly difficult family dinner. Clients are much more cautious about major purchases, and the competition between dealerships is intense. It's hard to build the kind of long-term relationships that generate consistent sales when everyone is fighting for the same customers. Dad nodded sympathetically, offering encouragement about market cycles and the importance of persistence during difficult periods. Mom suggested that Tyler's networking investments would eventually pay off once the economic climate improved. The same parents who had warned me about market competition and business sustainability were now making excuses for Tyler's struggle to succeed in his chosen sales environment. The contrast became even more stark as Elevate Digital Solutions continued its steady growth throughout Tyler's first year at Richardson Motors. By the 12-month mark, we'd expanded to 15 clients, hired a second full-time employee, and achieved monthly revenue that exceeded many corporate salaries. David Chen was thrilled with our progress and had begun discussing expansion strategies that could position us for significant growth in the second year. But family dinners still focused primarily on Tyler's career challenges and professional development needs. My business success was acknowledged with polite congratulations, but the conversation invariably shifted back to Tyler's struggles with demanding customers and competitive sales targets. It was as if my achievements existed in a separate universe that didn't warrant extended discussion or celebration. The engagement announcement came during a Sunday dinner in early fall, nearly 18 months after I'd launched Elevate Digital Solutions and just as Tyler was beginning his second year at Richardson Motors. Ashley Richardson, daughter of James Richardson, who owned Richardson Industries, had been dating Tyler for 8 months in what everyone described as a whirlwind romance built on their shared social circles and compatible personalities. "We're getting married next spring," Tyler announced with his characteristic confidence, as if the decision to propose after such a short relationship was obviously the right choice. Ashley's father has already offered to help with planning the kind of wedding that reflects both our family's values and social connections. The wedding planning that followed consumed family attention in ways that made Tyler's previous celebrations seem modest by comparison. Every detail was discussed extensively, from venue selection to guest list management to catering options that would impress Ashley's family's business associates and social connections. Mom threw herself into wedding coordination with an enthusiasm that transformed our family dynamics entirely around supporting Tyler's transition into married life. "This is such an important opportunity for Tyler to establish himself within Ashley's family's social network," she explained during one of our planning conversations. James Richardson knows everyone in the western suburbs business community. The wedding guest list reads like a who's who of successful entrepreneurs and company executives. The Richardson connection was certainly impressive from a networking perspective. James Richardson had built Richardson Industries into one of the most successful manufacturing companies in the Chicago area, with contracts spanning everything from automotive components to construction materials. His business relationships included mayors, corporate executives, and successful entrepreneurs who could potentially open doors for Tyler's career development that luxury car sales alone might never provide. But as the wedding planning intensified, I began to notice a familiar pattern emerging around my expected role in the celebration. While Tyler was positioned as the star of the event whose comfort and preferences drove every major decision, I was increasingly treated as family support staff, whose primary value lay in handling logistics and ensuring that everything ran smoothly behind the scenes. "Sarah, you're so good with details," Mom said during one particularly intense planning session. "Could you coordinate with the caterers about dietary restrictions and service timing? And maybe help with managing the gift registry organization? You have such a practical approach to complex projects." The requests were always framed as compliments about my organizational abilities, but the underlying message was clear. Tyler's wedding was too important to risk any logistical failures, so the responsible daughter should handle the practical aspects while the golden child focused on enjoying his special day. 3 weeks before the wedding, during what was supposed to be a final planning meeting, Mom made a suggestion that crystallized everything I'd been feeling about my role in the family hierarchy. "I was thinking Sarah could help with serving drinks during the cocktail hour," she said casually, as if asking her daughter to work as hired help at her brother's wedding was a perfectly reasonable request. "She knows all the family preferences, and it would ensure that Tyler and Ashley can focus entirely on greeting their guests and enjoying the celebration." The suggestion was presented as practical logistics rather than family dynamics, but the implication was unmistakable. Tyler's wedding was an opportunity for him to network with successful business leaders and establish his position within Ashley's family's social circle. My role was to facilitate his success by handling service responsibilities that would allow him to maximize his relationship-building opportunities without worrying about practical details. I agreed to help with drink service, not because I thought the request was appropriate, but because refusing would have created family drama that would overshadow Tyler's wedding day. Sometimes maintaining family harmony required accepting treatment that fell short of what you deserved, especially when the alternative was creating conflict during someone else's important moment. But as I prepared for my serving role at Tyler's wedding to Ashley Richardson, I had no idea that James Richardson himself would soon provide the most dramatic vindication of my business achievements that I could have imagined. The wedding day that was supposed to showcase Tyler's networking potential would instead become the moment when my own professional success finally received the family recognition it had always deserved. The morning of Tyler's wedding dawned crisp and clear, with the kind of perfect October weather that made Lake Forest Country Club look like something from a luxury lifestyle magazine. I arrived at the venue 2 hours before the ceremony, not as a guest preparing to celebrate my brother's marriage, but as family logistics coordinator tasked with ensuring that every detail aligned with Mom's meticulously planned timeline. The country club's main ballroom was a study in understated elegance, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking manicured golf courses that stretched toward Lake Michigan in the distance. Crystal chandeliers caught the morning sunlight, casting gentle reflections across hardwood floors that had hosted countless society weddings over the decades. Fresh floral arrangements in ivory and sage green adorned every surface, their subtle fragrance mixing with the polished wood and leather scents that gave the venue its old-money atmosphere. Tyler was holding court in the groom's preparation suite, surrounded by his groomsmen and several family friends who had arrived early to share in his pre-wedding excitement. His tuxedo was perfectly tailored, his hair styled with the kind of professional precision that came from the expensive salon appointment Mom had insisted upon, and his smile carried the confident glow of someone who had never doubted that this day would unfold exactly as planned. "Sarah, thank goodness you're here," Mom said, hurrying toward me with a clipboard that contained what appeared to be several pages of detailed instructions and timing coordination notes. The caterers need someone to walk through the cocktail service setup, and the florist has questions about centerpiece placement that require immediate decisions. I spent the next hour managing vendor coordination and setup logistics, checking off items from Mom's comprehensive list, while Tyler enjoyed a leisurely breakfast with his wedding party in the private dining room. The contrast wasn't lost on me that while I was ensuring tablecloth measurements met Mom's exacting standards, Tyler was being treated to mimosas and elaborate breakfast platters designed to help him feel relaxed and pampered on his special day. Ashley Richardson looked radiant in her bridal suite, surrounded by a team of professional stylists and several bridesmaids who fussed over every detail of her appearance with the kind of attention usually reserved for magazine photo shoots. Her wedding dress was a masterpiece of designer craftsmanship, with intricate beadwork that caught the light beautifully and a silhouette that had clearly been tailored by someone who understood how to enhance her natural elegance. "Everything looks absolutely perfect," Ashley said when I stopped by to confirm final timeline details. "Your family has been so wonderful throughout this entire planning process. Tyler is lucky to have such a supportive sister who handles all these important details so well." The comment was intended as genuine appreciation, but it reinforced the role I'd been assigned throughout the wedding planning process. While Tyler was lucky to have family support, that support was apparently best expressed through my behind-the-scenes coordination, rather than prominent participation in the actual celebration. I was the practical sister who ensured that Tyler's special day proceeded smoothly, not the accomplished professional whose own achievements might warrant recognition or celebration. James Richardson arrived with the kind of presence that immediately commanded attention throughout the venue. Tall and distinguished with silver hair and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to leadership roles, he moved through the country club like someone who belonged in spaces designed for successful people. His interactions with staff were polite but authoritative, and other guests clearly recognized him as someone whose opinions and connections carried significant weight in Chicago's business community. "You must be Tyler's sister," he said when Mom introduced us during the pre-ceremony reception. "I've heard wonderful things about your organizational skills and attention to detail. Tyler mentioned that you've been instrumental in ensuring everything runs perfectly today." Tyler had described me to Ashley's father as someone whose primary value lay in event coordination and logistical management. Not as a successful entrepreneur who had built a thriving digital marketing agency, not as someone whose business expertise might be interesting to discuss, but as the reliable family member who handled practical details so that Tyler could focus on more important relationship-building activities. "It's been my pleasure to help," I replied diplomatically, swallowing the disappointment of being introduced in terms of wedding planning assistance rather than professional accomplishments. "Tyler and Ashley deserve a beautiful celebration. Family support is so important during major life transitions," James agreed, his tone carrying the kind of benevolent approval that successful older men often used when acknowledging younger people's contributions to other people's success. "Tyler is fortunate to have someone who understands the importance of making everything perfect for his special day." The ceremony itself was everything Mom had envisioned when she'd first begun planning Tyler's wedding celebration. Ashley looked stunning as she walked down the aisle in her designer gown. Tyler appeared confident and handsome in his perfectly fitted tuxedo, and the entire event carried the kind of sophisticated elegance that would photograph beautifully and create lasting memories for everyone involved. I watched from the third row, having been assigned a seat that provided a good view of the proceedings without competing for attention with the immediate family members who occupied the front rows. Mom and Dad beamed with pride as they watched Tyler exchange vows with Ashley, their faces glowing with the satisfaction of parents whose son was making an advantageous marriage that would enhance his social and professional prospects for years to come. The vows themselves were traditional and heartfelt, focusing on commitment, partnership, and building a future together that honored both families' values and expectations. Tyler spoke about Ashley's intelligence, kindness, and the way her presence made him want to become a better man. Ashley praised Tyler's charm, ambition, and his ability to make her laugh even during difficult moments. As I listened to their promises to support each other's dreams and celebrate each other's achievements, I couldn't help but think about how different my own relationship with family support had been throughout my adult life. Tyler's dreams had been funded and celebrated from the beginning, while mine had required external validation before earning even grudging acknowledgement. Ashley was marrying into a family that had always believed in Tyler's potential, while I'd learned to succeed despite rather than because of family expectations. The cocktail reception that followed the ceremony was where my assigned role as drink service coordinator became most apparent to the assembled guests. While Tyler and Ashley moved through the crowd accepting congratulations and building relationships with Ashley's family's business associates, I found myself behind the bar area ensuring that champagne glasses remained filled and specialty cocktails were prepared according to guests' preferences. "Could I get another martini?" asked one of James Richardson's business associates, a man whose expensive suit and confident demeanor suggested significant success in whatever field had brought him into the Richardson family's social circle. "Of course," I replied, moving efficiently behind the bar to prepare his drink while simultaneously monitoring other guests' needs and ensuring that the catering staff maintained appropriate service levels throughout the reception area. "Sarah is Tyler's sister," Mom explained to anyone who inquired about my presence behind the bar. "She's been so helpful with all the wedding coordination. We're lucky to have someone in the family who enjoys handling these kinds of practical details." The explanation was always delivered with genuine appreciation, but it consistently positioned me as family support staff rather than as an accomplished professional who happened to be helping with family event logistics. When other guests learned that I was the bride's new sister-in-law, their questions focused on my role in wedding planning, rather than my career or personal achievements. "How lovely that Tyler has such a dedicated sister," one of Ashley's aunts commented while I refreshed her wine glass. "Family weddings require so much coordination. It must be wonderful for Tyler and Ashley to have someone handling all these details so they can focus on enjoying their celebration." The comment perfectly captured how my presence at the reception was being interpreted by the assembled guests. I wasn't Tyler's successful sister, who owned a thriving digital marketing agency that was generating impressive revenue and building a strong reputation in Chicago's business community. I was Tyler's helpful sister, whose primary contribution to the family was ensuring that important events proceeded smoothly through careful attention to practical logistics. Tyler, meanwhile, was absolutely glowing as he moved through the reception crowd with Ashley at his side. His natural charisma was on full display as he charmed Ashley's family friends and business associates, demonstrating exactly the kind of relationship-building skills that had convinced our parents to invest $75,000 in his professional development. Every conversation seemed effortless, every introduction led to additional networking opportunities, and every interaction reinforced his position as someone worth knowing in Chicago's suburban business community. "Tyler, you absolutely must meet David Morrison," James Richardson said, guiding Tyler toward a distinguished-looking man whose presence commanded immediate attention from nearby guests. "David owns the largest commercial real estate development firm in DuPage County. I think you two would have a lot to discuss about market opportunities in the luxury automotive sector." I watched from behind the bar as Tyler seamlessly transitioned into networking mode, engaging David Morrison in exactly the kind of strategic conversation that could lead to valuable business relationships and potential career advancement opportunities. This was precisely what our parents had envisioned when they'd enthusiastically supported Tyler's $75,000 career development investment, the chance to establish meaningful connections with successful business leaders who could open doors that traditional employment might never provide. "Tyler has such a natural ability to connect with people," Ashley's mother observed to Mom as they watched Tyler charm another group of James Richardson's business associates. "James is so impressed with his conversation skills and his understanding of relationship building in professional contexts." Mom practically glowed with pride as she absorbed these compliments about Tyler's networking abilities. "We've always known that Tyler had special talents for building relationships and understanding what motivates successful people," she replied. "That's why we were so supportive when he decided to invest seriously in developing those skills professionally." The conversation continued around me as I continued serving drinks and monitoring reception logistics, but the underlying message was unmistakable. Tyler's success at networking with Ashley's family's business associates was validation of our parents' decision to fund his professional development, proof that their investment strategy had been wise and far-sighted. His ability to charm successful older men and engage in meaningful business conversations justified every dollar of the $75,000 career development fund. What made the situation particularly challenging was that Tyler genuinely was excelling in this environment. His conversations with James Richardson's business associates appeared substantive and engaging. His questions demonstrated real interest in learning about their industries and experiences, and his responses showed the kind of emotional intelligence that could indeed lead to valuable long-term relationships. Our parents hadn't been wrong about Tyler's networking potential. They'd simply been unwilling to recognize that different types of intelligence and capability might be equally valuable in different contexts. As the afternoon progressed, I found myself relegated increasingly to service and coordination roles, while Tyler continued building the kind of business relationships that could enhance his career prospects for years to come. When guests needed fresh drinks, they approached me behind the bar. When catering logistics required coordination, Mom directed vendors to discuss details with me. When any practical issues arose that might interrupt Tyler's networking opportunities, I was expected to handle them quietly and efficiently. "Sarah, could you check with the kitchen about timing for dinner service?" Mom asked during a brief break in my drink preparation responsibilities. I want to make sure Tyler and Ashley have plenty of time to finish their conversations with James's business associates before we transition to the formal dinner portion of the reception. The request was perfectly reasonable from an event planning perspective, but it reinforced the pattern that had characterized my role throughout the wedding celebration. Tyler's time and attention were treated as precious resources that should be protected from practical concerns, while my time and expertise were readily available for whatever coordination tasks might arise. The successful entrepreneur who had built a thriving business was less important than the helpful sister who ensured that Tyler's networking opportunities remained uninterrupted. When I returned from kitchen coordination, I found Tyler deep in conversation with 3 of James Richardson's business associates about market trends in luxury consumer goods. His insights were surprisingly sophisticated, drawing from his experience at Richardson Motors, but extending into broader observations about consumer behavior and economic patterns that affected high-end purchases across multiple industries. The key is understanding that luxury buyers are investing in experiences and status, not just products. Tyler was explaining with the kind of confidence that made his audience lean in with genuine interest. When someone purchases a luxury vehicle, they're buying into a lifestyle narrative that extends far beyond transportation needs. It was exactly the kind of strategic thinking that Tyler had always been capable of producing when he was genuinely engaged with topics that interested him. The problem had never been his intelligence or his ability to understand complex business concepts. The challenge had always been maintaining focus and follow-through when initial enthusiasm encountered the sustained effort required for long-term success. But in this social context, surrounded by successful business leaders who were predisposed to like him because of his marriage to Ashley, Tyler was absolutely thriving. His charm was opening doors that might have taken years to access through traditional networking, and his insights were being received with the kind of respectful attention that could lead to genuine business opportunities. "Tyler, I'd love to continue this conversation sometime soon," David Morrison said as their discussion began winding down. "I think there might be some interesting opportunities for collaboration between your automotive expertise and some of the commercial developments we're planning in the western suburbs." "I would welcome that opportunity," Tyler replied smoothly, exchanging business cards with the kind of professional polish that suggested he'd been preparing for exactly these types of conversations throughout his career development process. As I watched this interaction unfold, while simultaneously preparing drinks for other guests, I couldn't help but feel a complex mixture of emotions about Tyler's networking success. Part of me was genuinely proud that he was capitalizing on the opportunities that Ashley's family connections were providing. His conversation skills were impressive, and his ability to engage successful business leaders in substantive discussions was exactly what our parents had hoped to achieve through their $75,000 investment in his professional development. But another part of me was acutely aware of the contrast between how Tyler's achievements were being celebrated and how my own business success had been acknowledged throughout the wedding planning process. Tyler's ability to charm James Richardson's business associates was being treated as validation of his professional potential and proof of our family's wise investment in his career development. My actual business success, generating real revenue and building a sustainable client base, had barely registered as worthy of mention during wedding-related conversations. The formal dinner portion of the reception provided a brief respite from drink service responsibilities, allowing me to join the other guests at assigned tables while professional catering staff handled meal service and wine pairing coordination. I had been seated at a table with several of Ashley's college friends and their spouses, Lovely people who made polite conversation about wedding planning and shared memories of Ashley's personality and achievements during their university years together. "How long have you been working in event planning?" asked Jennifer, one of Ashley's former roommates who had apparently assumed that my coordination role indicated professional expertise in wedding and reception management. "I actually own a digital marketing agency," I replied, grateful for the opportunity to discuss my actual career rather than my wedding coordination responsibilities. "The event planning has just been family support for Tyler and Ashley's celebration." "Oh, how interesting," Jennifer said with the kind of polite enthusiasm that suggested genuine curiosity about my professional background. "What kind of marketing services do you provide?" For the next 20 minutes, I found myself engaged in exactly the kind of conversation about my business that I'd hoped might occur naturally throughout the wedding celebration. Jennifer and her husband were both small business owners who faced exactly the kinds of digital marketing challenges that Elevate Digital Solutions was designed to address. Their questions were sophisticated and their interest appeared genuine as we discussed social media strategy, website optimization, and customer acquisition approaches that could enhance their respective businesses. "Do you have a business card?" Jennifer's husband asked as our conversation continued. "My restaurant could definitely benefit from the kind of strategic approach you're describing. We've been struggling with social media consistency and online visibility in a very competitive market." I provided my business card with genuine enthusiasm, recognizing that wedding networking could potentially generate valuable client relationships if people understood my actual professional expertise, rather than focusing solely on my event coordination role. This was exactly the kind of organic business development that occurred when people learned about Elevate Digital Solutions in social contexts, where they could understand how our services addressed real business challenges. But the conversation was interrupted by Mom's approach to our table with James Richardson in tow, apparently intent on introducing him to various family members and ensuring that he felt welcomed and appreciated throughout the reception celebration. "James, I'd love for you to meet Tyler's sister Sarah," Mom said with the kind of gracious hospitality that characterized her approach to important social situations. "Sarah has been absolutely instrumental in coordinating all the logistics that made today's celebration possible." "We met briefly earlier," James replied graciously, extending his hand with the kind of professional courtesy that successful business leaders had perfected through decades of social and professional interactions. Tyler mentioned how much family support has meant during the wedding planning process. "Sarah is wonderful with details and organization," Mom continued, apparently determined to ensure that James understood my value to the family in terms that emphasized practical support rather than professional achievement. "We're so fortunate to have someone who enjoys handling complex coordination projects." The introduction followed the exact pattern that had characterized my presentation to other wedding guests throughout the celebration. Mom's pride in my contributions was genuine and heartfelt, but it consistently positioned me as family support staff whose primary value lay in ensuring that Tyler's important events proceeded smoothly without logistical complications. "Organization and attention to detail are certainly valuable skills," James agreed politely, his tone carrying the kind of benevolent approval that successful older men often used when acknowledging younger people's supportive contributions to other people's achievements. "Sarah also runs her own business," Jennifer interjected helpfully, apparently recognizing that my professional accomplishments hadn't been adequately represented in Mom's introduction. "She owns a digital marketing agency that helps small businesses improve their online presence and customer acquisition strategies." "How interesting," James replied, his attention shifting slightly as he processed this additional information about my background. "What kind of businesses do you typically work with?" For a moment, I felt hopeful that the conversation might evolve into the kind of professional discussion that could showcase my actual expertise and accomplishments. James Richardson's business experience would certainly provide valuable context for understanding how digital marketing strategies could enhance traditional manufacturing and distribution operations. But before I could respond substantively to his question, Mom guided the conversation back toward wedding celebration topics, apparently concerned that extended business discussion might distract from the social objectives that had brought James to our table in the first place. "We should probably let James get back to celebrating with Tyler and Ashley," Mom said diplomatically, clearly prioritizing his relationship with the bride and groom over any extended conversation about my professional background. I know he's been looking forward to spending time with all of Ashley's new family members. The moment passed quickly, leaving me with the familiar feeling that my actual achievements were less important than maintaining appropriate social dynamics around Tyler's special day. James Richardson moved on to continue his conversations with other family members. Jennifer returned to discussing wedding details with Ashley's other friends, and I returned to the background role that had characterized my participation throughout the celebration. As the evening progressed, Tyler continued thriving in his networking conversations while I remained largely invisible to the business leaders who might have been interested in learning about Elevate Digital Solutions services. When guests needed additional drinks or coordination assistance, they approached me readily. When they wanted to discuss business opportunities or professional relationships, they gravitated toward Tyler and his expanding circle of conversation partners. The dancing portion of the reception provided the most painful illustration of these different social dynamics. Tyler and Ashley's first dance was a moment of pure celebration, with all the assembled guests watching appreciatively as they moved together with obvious joy and affection. Family members were invited to join them on the dance floor, creating photo opportunities that would preserve memories of this important family milestone for years to come. But even during the dancing, I found myself primarily responsible for ensuring that the celebration continued smoothly behind the scenes. When elderly guests needed assistance with chair arrangement, I helped coordinate seating adjustments. When the band needed clarification about music timing, I served as the family liaison for technical coordination. When any practical issues arose that might interrupt Tyler and Ashley's enjoyment of their celebration, I was expected to handle them quietly and efficiently. "Sarah, you've been so wonderful throughout this entire day," Ashley said during a brief break from dancing and networking conversations. "Tyler is so lucky to have a sister who cares enough to make sure everything is perfect." The appreciation was genuine and heartfelt, and I truly was happy that Tyler and Ashley were enjoying their wedding celebration exactly as they'd envisioned it. But the consistent characterization of my contributions in terms of support and coordination, rather than professional capability, was beginning to feel like a deliberate diminishment of my actual accomplishments and expertise. When the evening finally wound down and guests began departing with warm thanks for a beautiful celebration, I felt emotionally exhausted in ways that had nothing to do with the physical demands of event coordination. The wedding had been a complete success from every objective measure. Tyler and Ashley were radiant, the Richardson family appeared genuinely pleased with their new in-laws, and numerous business relationships had been established that could benefit Tyler's career for years to come. But my own role in the celebration had reinforced every frustrating pattern that had characterized my relationship with family recognition throughout my adult life. Tyler's networking success was being celebrated as validation of our parents' investment strategy and proof of his professional potential. My actual business achievements remained largely invisible to the very people who might have been most interested in learning about Elevate Digital Solutions services. As I helped load wedding gifts into cars and coordinated final cleanup logistics, I couldn't shake the feeling that this beautiful family celebration had somehow managed to diminish my professional identity in ways that would take weeks to recover from emotionally. The successful entrepreneur who had built a thriving business had spent the day serving drinks and managing logistics, while her brother networked with potential business partners who never learned about her actual capabilities. The drive home to my Lincoln Park apartment felt longer than usual, providing plenty of time to process the complex emotions that Tyler's wedding had generated. I was genuinely happy for Tyler and Ashley, who clearly loved each other and had created a celebration that honored both families' values and expectations. I was proud that my coordination efforts had contributed to their perfect day, and grateful that everything had proceeded smoothly, without any logistical complications. But I was also deeply frustrated by the missed opportunities for professional recognition and the continued pattern of being valued primarily for supportive contributions rather than individual achievements. The wedding reception had been filled with successful business leaders who faced exactly the kinds of digital marketing challenges that my agency was designed to address, but most of them had never learned about my professional expertise, because my role had been defined in terms of event coordination rather than business accomplishment. As I sat in my apartment that night, still wearing the dress I'd chosen carefully to look professional while remaining appropriate for service responsibilities, I found myself thinking about the vast difference between Tyler's wedding day experience and what mine might someday look like. Tyler had spent his celebration building valuable business relationships and receiving recognition for his networking abilities. I had spent the day ensuring that his success remained uninterrupted by practical concerns. The irony wasn't lost on me that while Tyler had been charming James Richardson's business associates with insights about luxury consumer behavior, I had been serving drinks to people who owned exactly the kinds of small businesses that could benefit significantly from Elevate Digital Solutions' strategic marketing approaches. The expertise that could have generated meaningful business relationships had remained hidden behind a service role that positioned me as family support staff rather than accomplished professional. But as I prepared for bed that night, I reminded myself that Tyler's wedding day networking success didn't diminish the genuine achievements that I'd built through careful planning and sustained effort. Elevate Digital Solutions was thriving because the business strategy was sound, and the execution was excellent, not because family members recognized its value or celebrated its growth. External validation might be emotionally satisfying, but internal confidence based on actual results was more reliable and sustainable. Little did I know that the next family gathering would provide exactly the kind of dramatic vindication that I'd never dared to hope for, when James Richardson himself would finally learn about my professional accomplishments in ways that would shock everyone who had spent Tyler's wedding day treating me as helpful family support staff rather than successful business owner. The Monday morning after Tyler's wedding brought a return to the familiar routine of managing Elevate Digital Solutions' growing client base and expanding service offerings. Maya and I had scheduled back-to-back meetings with potential new clients, and the contrast between professional recognition in my business environment and family dynamics at the wedding reception was stark and refreshing. "How was the wedding?" Maya asked as we prepared for our first client presentation, noting my slightly tired appearance after the emotionally exhausting celebration. "Beautiful ceremony, successful networking for Tyler, and a lot of coordination responsibilities for me," I replied diplomatically, not wanting to burden Maya with family dynamics that didn't affect our business operations. But it's good to be back to focusing on work that actually showcases what we do well. The client meetings that followed were energizing in exactly the ways that Tyler's wedding reception had not been. Business owners who were struggling with digital marketing challenges immediately grasped the value of our strategic approach and asked sophisticated questions about implementation timelines and expected results. These conversations focused on my expertise and Elevate Digital Solutions capabilities, rather than my willingness to handle practical support tasks for other people's success. By the end of that first week back from wedding responsibilities, we'd signed contracts with 2 new clients and received referrals for 3 additional prospects who wanted to discuss comprehensive digital marketing strategies for their growing businesses. The momentum was exactly what I'd projected in my original business plan. Validation that the market research and financial modeling had been accurate despite my parents' initial skepticism about sustainable growth potential. But the family dynamics that had been so prominent during Tyler's wedding celebration continued affecting relationships in subtle ways throughout the following weeks. Family dinner conversations invariably focused on Tyler and Ashley's adjustment to married life, their house hunting progress, and the business relationships that Tyler was developing through his connection to the Richardson family network. "Tyler had lunch with David Morrison last week," Dad reported with obvious pride during one of our Sunday dinners. "David is seriously interested in exploring collaboration opportunities between Tyler's automotive expertise and some commercial real estate developments in the western suburbs." "That's wonderful," I replied genuinely, recognizing that Tyler's networking efforts were generating exactly the kinds of opportunities that our parents had hoped to achieve through their $75,000 investment in his professional development. "It sounds like the wedding connections are opening interesting doors. James Richardson has been so generous about introducing Tyler to his business associates," Mom added enthusiastically. "He mentioned that Tyler has real potential for building relationships with successful people who could help advance his career in ways that traditional employment might never provide." The conversation continued in this pattern for most of the dinner, with detailed updates about Tyler's expanding professional network and minimal inquiry about my own business developments. When I mentioned that Elevate Digital Solutions had signed several new clients and was considering office expansion, the response was polite congratulations, followed immediately by return to Tyler's more exciting networking adventures. "We're so proud of both of you," Mom said diplomatically when she noticed that Tyler's achievements were dominating our family conversation. "Tyler's relationship-building success and Sarah's steady business growth show that you're both finding your professional paths." The characterization of Tyler's progress as success and mine as steady growth perfectly captured the ongoing difference in how our respective achievements were perceived and celebrated within family dynamics. Tyler's networking lunches were treated as significant career developments that warranted detailed discussion and proud recognition. My actual business expansion was acknowledged politely, but didn't generate the same level of enthusiasm or extended conversation. 2 months after the wedding, this pattern was disrupted by an unexpected phone call that would change everything about how my professional accomplishments were perceived within our family. Maya and I were working late on a comprehensive digital marketing strategy for a new client, when my personal phone rang with a number I didn't immediately recognize. "Hello, is this Sarah Martinez from Elevate Digital Solutions?" asked a professional-sounding male voice that carried the kind of authority and confidence I'd learned to associate with successful business leaders. "Yes, this is Sarah," I replied cautiously, wondering how someone had obtained my personal phone number rather than calling through our business line. "This is James Richardson. We met briefly at Tyler's wedding reception. I hope you don't mind that I tracked down your contact information through Ashley and Tyler, but I have a business situation that might benefit from your expertise." James Richardson was calling me directly about a potential business opportunity. The man whose business associates Tyler had been networking with throughout his wedding reception wanted to discuss digital marketing services with the sister, who had spent that same reception serving drinks and coordinating logistics. "Of course, Mr. Richardson," I replied, trying to keep the surprise out of my voice while simultaneously gesturing to Maya that this was a conversation she might want to pay attention to. "What kind of business situation are you dealing with?" "Richardson Industries is facing some significant challenges with our digital presence and online customer acquisition strategies," James explained with the kind of directness that suggested he'd already invested considerable thought in this decision to contact me. "We've been working with a traditional marketing agency for several years, but their approach feels increasingly outdated for the current business environment." Richardson Industries needed digital marketing help. The successful manufacturing company that employed hundreds of people and generated millions in annual revenue was struggling with exactly the kinds of challenges that Elevate Digital Solutions was designed to address. And instead of seeking assistance from established agencies with impressive client rosters and corporate credentials, James Richardson was calling the sister-in-law who had coordinated his daughter's wedding reception. "What specific challenges are you experiencing?" I asked, shifting into professional consultation mode, while Maya listened with obvious excitement about the potential significance of this opportunity. "Our website generates very little qualified traffic, our social media presence is virtually non-existent, and our online customer acquisition costs have become unsustainable compared to traditional sales channel performance," James listed with the kind of specific detail that suggested he'd been analyzing these problems carefully. "We need someone who understands both digital strategy and manufacturing industry dynamics." The challenges he described were exactly the kinds of complex, multifaceted problems that larger agencies often struggled to address effectively because they lacked industry-specific expertise and treated digital marketing as separate from overall business strategy. Richardson Industries needed integrated solutions that could enhance their existing strengths while developing new capabilities in digital customer acquisition and relationship management. "I'd be happy to discuss how Elevate Digital Solutions might be able to help," I said, professional excitement building as I recognized the scope and potential impact of this project. "When would be convenient for you to meet and review your current situation in more detail? Would tomorrow afternoon work for you?" James asked with the kind of urgency that suggested Richardson Industries' digital marketing challenges were affecting business performance in ways that required immediate attention. "I know this is short notice, but I'd prefer to move quickly on addressing these issues." We scheduled a meeting for the following day at Richardson Industries' corporate headquarters, a substantial facility in the western suburbs that housed both manufacturing operations and executive offices. As I hung up the phone, Maya was practically bouncing with excitement about the potential implications of James Richardson's direct outreach. "Do you realize what this could mean for Elevate Digital Solutions?" she asked, her voice carrying the kind of professional enthusiasm that had made her such a valuable addition to our team. "Richardson Industries is exactly the kind of established company that could validate our approach with larger businesses and generate referrals throughout their industry network." She was absolutely right about the potential significance of this opportunity. Landing Richardson Industries as a client would represent a major expansion of our business model. demonstrating that Elevate Digital Solutions could deliver results for larger, more complex organizations rather than focusing exclusively on small businesses with limited marketing budgets. But beyond the professional implications, James Richardson's direct contact represented something even more meaningful in terms of family dynamics and personal validation. The man whose business associates had spent Tyler's wedding reception impressed by his networking abilities had independently recognized value in my professional expertise that no one in my family had ever acknowledged or celebrated. That evening, I spent hours preparing for the Richardson Industries meeting with the kind of thorough research and strategic analysis that had characterized my approach to business development since launching Elevate Digital Solutions. I reviewed their website and social media presence, analyzed their competitive landscape, researched industry trends that affected manufacturing companies' customer acquisition strategies, and developed preliminary recommendations that could demonstrate our understanding of their specific challenges. The preparation was energizing in ways that reminded me why I'd been so confident about my business plan when I'd first approached my parents for investment support. This was exactly the kind of strategic thinking and industry analysis that I'd always been capable of producing when given the opportunity to apply my expertise to complex business challenges. The difference was that James Richardson was approaching me as a professional whose capabilities might solve real problems, rather than as family support staff whose primary value lay in ensuring that other people's achievements remained uninterrupted. As I reviewed Richardson Industries' digital marketing challenges late into the night, I couldn't help thinking about the irony of this situation. Tyler's wedding had positioned him as the family member with promising business networking potential, while I'd been relegated to service and coordination responsibilities that kept my professional expertise largely hidden from exactly the people who might have been most interested in learning about it. But James Richardson had somehow recognized value in my brief professional discussion, despite the context of wedding coordination that had defined most of our interaction. His decision to seek out my contact information and initiate business discussions suggested that he'd paid more attention to my actual capabilities than anyone else at that celebration, including my own family members. The meeting at Richardson Industries would prove to be far more significant than even I anticipated, setting in motion a chain of events that would ultimately provide the most dramatic vindication of my professional abilities that I could have imagined. But as I prepared for sleep that night, I had no idea that James Richardson's business challenges would soon create opportunities for recognition that would shock everyone who had spent Tyler's wedding day treating me as helpful family support rather than accomplished business owner. The Richardson Industries corporate headquarters occupied an impressive campus in the western suburbs, with modern office buildings connected to manufacturing facilities that spoke to decades of successful business operations. As I pulled into the visitor parking area, I could see the scope of James Richardson's business empire through the steady flow of delivery trucks, employee vehicles, and the general bustle of a company that clearly employed hundreds of people across multiple divisions. Maya had offered to accompany me to the meeting, but I decided to handle this initial consultation independently, recognizing that James Richardson's personal outreach deserved the kind of direct attention that would demonstrate Elevate Digital Solutions' commitment to understanding his specific business challenges. The professional excitement I felt walking toward the main reception area was exactly what I'd hoped to experience more frequently as our agency expanded into larger, more complex client relationships. The reception area reflected the same understated success that had characterized the wedding venue, with polished surfaces and carefully chosen artwork that suggested prosperity without ostentation. James Richardson's assistant greeted me with professional courtesy and efficient scheduling that indicated this was an organization where time was valued and meetings proceeded according to carefully planned agendas. "Mr. Richardson will see you in the main conference room," she explained, guiding me through corridors lined with photographs documenting the company's growth over several decades. "He's asked our digital marketing coordinator and our sales director to join the conversation, since they've been working on these challenges for quite some time." The conference room was exactly what I'd expected from a successful manufacturing company, with a large table surrounded by comfortable chairs and wall-mounted displays that could accommodate detailed presentations and strategic planning discussions. James Richardson rose to greet me with the same professional courtesy he'd demonstrated at Tyler's wedding, but his demeanor carried a focused intensity that suggested this meeting represented a serious attempt to address significant business challenges. "Sarah, thank you for making time on such short notice," he said, gesturing toward a chair positioned where I could easily address the other attendees. "I'd like you to meet Jennifer Walsh, our current digital marketing coordinator, and Michael Chen, our sales director. They can provide specifics about the challenges we've been facing with our online presence and customer acquisition efforts." Jennifer Walsh appeared to be in her early 30s, with the kind of earnest professionalism that suggested genuine expertise combined with frustration about her inability to achieve desired results within existing budget and strategy constraints. Michael Chen carried himself with the confident authority of someone who had been succeeding in sales for many years, but was clearly struggling to adapt traditional relationship-building approaches to digital customer acquisition requirements. "We've been working with Morrison Marketing Group for the past 3 years, Jennifer began, referencing a traditional advertising agency that I recognized as one of the larger firms serving corporate clients throughout the Chicago area. They've handled our website development and social media management, but the results have been disappointing relative to the investment we've been making." "What specific results have you been expecting versus what you've actually achieved?" I asked, pulling out my tablet to take detailed notes while demonstrating the kind of strategic inquiry approach that had proven effective with smaller business clients. "Our website generates approximately 200 unique visitors per month, but less than 5% convert to actual sales inquiries," Michael replied, consulting his own notes with the frustrated precision of someone who had been tracking disappointing metrics for extended periods. "Meanwhile, our traditional sales channels continue generating steady revenue through established customer relationships and referral networks." The numbers painted a clear picture of a company whose digital presence was functioning more as an expensive business card than as an actual customer acquisition and relationship management system. Richardson Industries was investing in digital marketing without achieving digital results, a common problem for established businesses that approached online strategy as an extension of traditional advertising rather than as a fundamentally different approach to customer engagement and sales conversion. "What about social media engagement and content marketing efforts?" I continued, recognizing that comprehensive digital strategy required integration across multiple channels, rather than focusing exclusively on website performance. "Morrison Marketing posts content twice per week across our Facebook and LinkedIn profiles," Jennifer explained, her tone suggesting that she understood these efforts were inadequate but lacked authority to push for more comprehensive approaches. "The engagement rates are minimal, and we've never tracked any direct sales attribution from social media activities." This was exactly the kind of situation where Elevate Digital Solutions' integrated approach could generate dramatic improvements in measurable business results. Richardson Industries needed coordinated strategy across website optimization, content marketing, social media engagement, search engine optimization, and lead nurturing systems that would transform their digital presence from passive business card to active customer acquisition engine. "Have you considered implementing marketing automation systems that could nurture leads through longer sales cycles?" I asked, recognizing that manufacturing companies often faced complex B2B sales processes that required sustained relationship building rather than immediate transaction completion. Morrison Marketing mentioned marketing automation, but they estimated implementation costs around $50,000 for the software systems alone, James replied, clearly frustrated by proposals that emphasized expensive technology solutions without demonstrating clear returns on investment. When we asked for specific projections about lead generation and sales conversion improvements, their estimates were vague and unconvincing. The conversation continued for over an hour, with Jennifer and Michael providing detailed information about their current digital marketing investments, results metrics, and specific frustrations with their existing agency relationship. As they described their challenges, I began developing a comprehensive strategic framework that could address their immediate needs while establishing foundation systems for sustained digital growth. Richardson Industries wasn't just struggling with inadequate website traffic and social media engagement. They were facing the broader challenge that many established businesses encountered when trying to integrate digital customer acquisition strategies with traditional sales processes and relationship management approaches. They needed solutions that enhanced their existing strengths while developing new capabilities that could expand their market reach and improve customer acquisition efficiency. Based on what you've described, I think Richardson Industries would benefit from a completely integrated digital marketing strategy rather than the piecemeal approach you've been using, I said, transitioning into consultation mode with the kind of strategic confidence that had proven effective throughout Elevate Digital Solutions' client development process. What would that look like practically, James asked, leaning forward with obvious interest in hearing specific recommendations rather than general observations about digital marketing best practices. I spent the next 30 minutes outlining a comprehensive approach that would transform Richardson Industries' digital presence through coordinated website optimization, content marketing strategy, social media engagement systems, search engine optimization, email marketing automation, and lead nurturing processes, designed specifically for B2B manufacturing sales cycles. The strategy I described wasn't theoretical or generic. Every recommendation was tailored specifically to the challenges and opportunities that Jennifer and Michael had described, drawing from my experience with similar businesses while accounting for Richardson Industries' unique market position and existing customer relationship strengths. The key is developing systems that support your sales team's relationship-building approach rather than replacing it, I explained, recognizing that successful digital strategy for established businesses required integration with existing processes rather than complete operational overhaul. Digital marketing should generate qualified leads and provide customer intelligence that makes your traditional sales efforts more efficient and effective. What kind of timeline and investment would this comprehensive approach require? Michael asked, clearly intrigued by the strategic framework but concerned about implementation complexity and resource requirements. I would recommend a 12-month implementation timeline with total investment around $35,000, including strategy development, system setup, content creation, and ongoing optimization, I replied, offering pricing that reflected the value of comprehensive service while remaining significantly below what Morrison Marketing had quoted for partial automation solutions. The room fell silent as James, Jennifer, and Michael processed this information and compared it to their current agency relationship and budget allocations. I could see them evaluating not just the financial investment but the potential returns and the strategic logic of my integrated approach compared to the fragmented efforts they'd been pursuing for the past 3 years. That's substantially less than what Morrison Marketing quoted for much more limited services, Jennifer observed, clearly surprised by the scope of services I was proposing relative to the investment required. Elevate Digital Solutions specializes in providing enterprise-level strategy and execution at pricing that's accessible to growing businesses, I explained. We're able to offer comprehensive services efficiently because we focus exclusively on digital marketing rather than maintaining the overhead structure of full-service advertising agencies. When could you begin? James asked, his tone suggesting that he'd already decided to move forward but wanted to understand implementation logistics and timeline coordination. I could start with strategic analysis and system auditing immediately, with full implementation beginning within 2 weeks, I replied, recognizing that James Richardson's sense of urgency reflected genuine business pressure that required prompt attention rather than extended deliberation. The meeting concluded with handshakes and commitments to begin working together on a comprehensive digital marketing transformation that would position Richardson Industries for sustained growth in increasingly competitive manufacturing markets. As I walked back to my car, I felt the familiar satisfaction that came with landing a significant client whose challenges aligned perfectly with Elevate Digital Solutions' strategic capabilities and service offerings. But more than professional satisfaction, I felt vindication about the business instincts and strategic thinking that my parents had deemed too risky to support financially. James Richardson's decision to hire Elevate Digital Solutions represented external validation from a successful business leader who had independently assessed my capabilities and chosen to invest in my expertise despite having access to much larger, more established agencies. The Richardson Industries project began immediately and proceeded even more successfully than I'd projected during our initial consultation. Within the first month, we'd completely redesigned their website, with optimized user experience and conversion tracking systems, developed comprehensive content marketing strategies that positioned them as industry experts, and implemented social media engagement approaches that generated meaningful business inquiries rather than generic engagement metrics. Maya threw herself into the project with professional enthusiasm that made long days feel energizing rather than exhausting. Her graphic design expertise proved invaluable for creating marketing materials that reflected Richardson Industries' established reputation while appealing to newer customer segments that prefer digital research and relationship-building processes. The lead generation numbers are incredible, Jennifer Walsh reported during our 6-week progress review meeting. We've generated more qualified sales inquiries in the past month than we typically see in entire quarters using traditional marketing approaches. More importantly, the quality of these leads is substantially higher, Michael Chen added, consulting detailed metrics that demonstrated not just increased volume but improved customer acquisition efficiency. The prospects who contact us through digital channels arrive with better understanding of our capabilities and more specific project requirements. By the 3-month mark, Richardson Industries' digital transformation was generating results that exceeded even my most optimistic projections. Website traffic had increased by 400%, social media engagement rates had improved dramatically, and most importantly, digital marketing was contributing measurably to actual sales revenue rather than functioning as expensive brand awareness investment. The success wasn't just statistical. James Richardson began referring Elevate Digital Solutions to other business leaders within his professional network, generating client prospects whose budgets and project complexity represented substantial growth opportunities for our agency. These referrals carried the kind of credibility that years of traditional marketing efforts might never have achieved, because they came from direct experience with measurable business results. I've been telling everyone at the Manufacturing Association meetings about the transformation you've achieved for Richardson Industries, James told me during one of our monthly strategy review sessions. Several companies have expressed serious interest in learning about your approach to digital marketing for established businesses. Within 6 months, the Richardson Industries' success had generated 4 additional clients, whose projects allowed Elevate Digital Solutions to expand our team, upgrade our office space, and establish ourselves as the premier digital marketing agency serving manufacturing and distribution companies throughout the Chicago area. The business growth was exactly what I'd projected in my original business plan, validation that the market research and strategic framework had been accurate despite my parents' initial skepticism. But the most significant validation was still ahead, coming in a form that would shock everyone who had spent Tyler's wedding day treating me as helpful family support rather than accomplished business professional. The opportunity for dramatic vindication arose 8 months after beginning the Richardson Industries project, when James Richardson called to discuss what he described as a special request that extended beyond typical client relationship boundaries. "Sarah, I know this is unusual, but I'm hoping you might be willing to speak at a family event," he said during our phone conversation, his tone carrying the kind of personal warmth that had developed through months of successful business collaboration. "Ashley and Tyler are hosting a holiday gathering for both families, and I thought it might be interesting for everyone to hear about the business transformation you've achieved for Richardson Industries." The request was unexpected and potentially complicated, given the family dynamics that had characterized my relationship with recognition throughout Tyler's wedding celebration and subsequent family gatherings. Speaking about Elevate Digital Solutions' success at a family event would position me very differently than the supportive coordination role I'd been assigned during previous celebrations. "What kind of presentation would you be interested in?" I asked, curious about James Richardson's intentions and the context he envisioned for discussing business achievements at what was presumably a social family gathering. "Nothing formal," he assured me. "I just think your parents and Tyler would be fascinated to understand the scope of what you've accomplished with Richardson Industries and how dramatically you've enhanced our business performance. From what Tyler has told me, I don't think they fully appreciate the level of success you've achieved." James Richardson was offering to provide family recognition for my professional achievements in ways that Tyler's wedding celebration had completely failed to accomplish. The man whose business associates had been impressed by Tyler's networking abilities during his reception wanted to ensure that my actual business success received appropriate acknowledgement from family members who had consistently undervalued my capabilities. "I would be honored to share information about the Richardson Industries project," I replied, recognizing that this opportunity represented exactly the kind of validation I'd hoped might occur naturally but had never wanted to pursue directly. The holiday gathering was scheduled for the Saturday evening before Christmas, at Tyler and Ashley's new house in the same western suburbs where I'd grown up. Ashley had inherited her father's attention to detail and social grace, creating an elegant celebration that honored both families' traditions while establishing their own identity as a married couple with sophisticated entertaining capabilities. I arrived at Tyler and Ashley's house, carrying a small portfolio of materials that documented the Richardson Industries' digital marketing transformation, unsure exactly how James Richardson planned to introduce the topic but prepared to discuss the project professionally if appropriate opportunities arose during the evening's conversations. The guest list included both the Martinez and Richardson families, along with several of Tyler and Ashley's friends, and a few of James Richardson's business associates, who had apparently become family friends through the expanded social connections that marriage had created. The atmosphere was warm and festive, with excellent food and drinks that made conversation flow easily among people who might not otherwise have had opportunities to interact socially. Tyler was absolutely glowing as he moved through the gathering, demonstrating his hosting abilities while continuing to build relationships with James Richardson's business associates, who were attending as family friends rather than networking targets. His confidence and social skills were on full display, reinforcing the impression that his marriage to Ashley had enhanced his professional prospects in exactly the ways our parents had hoped when they'd invested in his career development. "Tyler has really found his element," Mom observed to James Richardson, as they watched Tyler engage a group of guests in animated conversation about holiday travel plans and restaurant recommendations. "Marriage has been wonderful for him professionally as well as personally. He's certainly a natural relationship builder," James agreed diplomatically, but I noticed his attention shifting toward me as I joined their conversation group. "Speaking of professional development, I've been hoping to share some information about the remarkable business success that Sarah has achieved with Richardson Industries." The transition was trajectory. "Sarah, I don't think any of us realized the scope of what you've been accomplishing," Dad said, his voice carrying a mixture of pride and surprise that suggested he was reevaluating his understanding of my professional capabilities and business success. "The scope is quite remarkable," James confirmed, clearly enjoying the opportunity to educate my family about achievements they had apparently underestimated or overlooked entirely. "Sarah has built Elevate Digital Solutions into one of the most effective marketing agencies serving manufacturing and distribution companies in the region." "One of the most effective?" Mom repeated, apparently struggling to reconcile this assessment with her perception of my business as a modest freelance operation that handled small client projects. "I would say the most effective, based on the measurable results we've achieved compared to our previous agency relationships," James clarified, his tone carrying the authority of someone whose business experience provided credible context for evaluating marketing agency performance. The conversation was unfolding exactly as I'd hoped professional recognition might someday occur, but it felt surreal to receive this level of acknowledgement at a family gathering where I'd previously been valued primarily for coordination and support responsibilities. James Richardson was presenting my business achievements with the kind of enthusiasm and specific detail that my own family had never demonstrated, even when directly informed about Elevate Digital Solutions' growth and client success. "Sarah, would you be willing to share some specifics about the Richardson Industries project?" Ashley asked, genuinely curious about business strategies that had impressed her father enough to warrant extended discussion at a family social gathering. For the next 20 minutes, I found myself presenting an impromptu case study about Richardson Industries' digital marketing transformation to an audience that included my parents, Tyler, and several of James Richardson's business associates, who had been attending as family friends but were clearly interested in learning about strategies that could benefit their own companies. The presentation covered everything from initial challenge assessment, through strategy development, implementation phases, results measurement, and ongoing optimization approaches that had sustained performance improvements throughout the 8-month project timeline. As I described the comprehensive approach that had generated such dramatic business results, I could see my family members processing information about my professional capabilities that they had apparently never fully understood or appreciated. The key was developing integrated systems that enhanced Richardson Industries' existing sales strengths rather than replacing traditional relationship-building approaches, I explained, using the same strategic framework that had proven effective during client presentations and business development conversations. "That's exactly right," James confirmed, clearly pleased with my professional presentation and its effect on the assembled audience. "Sarah understood our business culture and developed solutions that worked with our established processes, rather than requiring complete operational changes." When I finished describing the project and its results, the room remained focused on me in ways that felt both gratifying and unfamiliar. My parents appeared genuinely impressed by the scope and sophistication of the work I'd been doing. Tyler looked somewhat stunned by the revelation that his sister had achieved significant business success that he'd been completely unaware of, and James Richardson's business associates were asking specific questions about services that could benefit their own companies. "Sarah, I think we owe you an apology," Mom said quietly, her voice carrying genuine remorse that suggested she was recognizing patterns of family recognition that had consistently undervalued my achievements. "We've been so focused on Tyler's networking success that we haven't properly celebrated your business accomplishments. We clearly didn't understand the level of success you've achieved," Dad added, his tone reflecting the kind of professional respect that I'd hoped to earn but had never directly pursued within family dynamics. Building relationships with clients like Richardson Industries and generating these kinds of measurable results represents exactly the type of business achievement we should have been supporting from the beginning. The acknowledgement was everything I'd wanted to hear from my parents since launching Elevate Digital Solutions. Validation that my business strategy and professional capabilities warranted the same recognition and celebration that Tyler's networking achievements had consistently received. But more than personal satisfaction, their recognition represented a fundamental shift in family dynamics that could affect our relationships for years to come. "I think we all underestimated Sarah's business acumen," Tyler admitted, his characteristic confidence replaced by obvious surprise about his sister's professional accomplishments. "I had no idea you were working with companies at this level or achieving these kinds of results." "Most impressive of all," James Richardson interjected, clearly determined to ensure that the full scope of my achievements received appropriate recognition, "is that Sarah built Elevate Digital Solutions without any external investment or family financial support. Everything she's accomplished represents independent success based entirely on her own strategic thinking and business execution." The comment about independent success created a moment of uncomfortable silence as my parents processed the implicit reminder that they had declined to invest in my business plan while enthusiastically funding Tyler's career development activities. The contrast between their initial rejection of my thoroughly researched proposal and their current pride in my independently achieved success was stark and undeniable. "We made some poor decisions about recognizing and supporting Sarah's potential," Dad said finally, his voice carrying the kind of regret that suggested genuine understanding of missed opportunities rather than defensive justification of past choices. "The important thing is that Sarah succeeded despite our lack of support," Mom added, apparently recognizing that their previous investment decisions had been based on flawed assessment of our respective capabilities and potential for professional achievement. "Actually," James Richardson said, clearly enjoying his role in providing family education about my business success, "I think Sarah's independent achievement makes her accomplishments even more impressive. Building a successful agency without external funding requires exceptional strategic thinking and business execution skills." The conversation continued for another hour, with James Richardson's business associates asking detailed questions about Elevate Digital Solutions services and several expressing serious interest in scheduling consultations to discuss their own digital marketing challenges. By the end of the evening, I had collected business cards from potential clients whose projects could represent substantial growth opportunities for my agency. But more importantly, I had finally received the kind of family recognition and professional acknowledgement that I'd hoped might occur naturally throughout my business development process. James Richardson's presentation of my achievements had provided external validation that forced my family to reevaluate their understanding of my capabilities and to recognize patterns of support that had consistently favored Tyler's potential over my actual accomplishments. As the evening wound down and guests began departing with warm appreciation for Tyler and Ashley's hospitality, James Richardson approached me for a private conversation that would provide one final moment of vindication. "Sarah, I want you to know that referring business leaders to Elevate Digital Solutions has been one of the most satisfying professional recommendations I've made in years," he said, his tone carrying genuine warmth that had developed through months of successful business collaboration. "You've achieved exactly what you promised during our initial meeting, and your strategic approach has impressed everyone who's worked with you." "Thank you, Mr. Richardson," I replied, genuinely grateful for his support and the opportunities he'd created for business development and family recognition. The Richardson Industries project has been incredibly rewarding, both professionally and personally. "I hope tonight's conversation helped your family understand what you've accomplished," he continued, clearly aware that my professional achievements had been undervalued within family dynamics prior to his intervention. Sometimes external perspective is necessary for people to recognize exceptional capabilities that they've been taking for granted. The drive home from Tyler and Ashley's holiday gathering felt different from any family event I could remember, filled with satisfaction about professional recognition and optimism about family relationships that had been fundamentally altered by James Richardson's presentation of my business success. For the first time since launching Elevate Digital Solutions, my achievements had received the kind of celebration and acknowledgement that Tyler's networking potential had always enjoyed. The following weeks brought a series of conversations with family members who were clearly processing new understanding of my professional capabilities and business achievements. Mom called several times to ask detailed questions about Elevate Digital Solutions' growth plans and client development strategies, demonstrating genuine interest in my business activities that hadn't characterized our previous discussions. "I want you to know how proud we are of what you've built," she said during one of these conversations, her voice carrying sincere admiration that felt more authentic than previous polite acknowledgments of my business progress. "James Richardson's description of your accomplishments really opened our eyes to the scope of your success." Dad's approach was more analytical, focusing on the business strategy and market positioning that had enabled such dramatic client results. His questions were sophisticated and respectful, treating me as a professional whose expertise warranted serious discussion rather than polite family encouragement. "Your integrated approach to digital marketing makes perfect sense from a business strategy perspective," he observed during one of our conversations. "I can see why established companies would choose Elevate Digital Solutions over larger agencies that treat digital marketing as separate from overall business objectives." Even Tyler's attitude toward my professional achievements evolved significantly following the holiday gathering revelation. His initial surprise about my business success was replaced by genuine respect for accomplishments that he was finally beginning to understand and appreciate. "I feel terrible that I never asked more detailed questions about your business," he admitted during a coffee meeting we'd scheduled to discuss family dynamics and professional development. "I was so focused on my own career challenges that I didn't recognize what you were achieving with Elevate Digital Solutions." The conversation with Tyler was particularly meaningful because it represented acknowledgement from the family member whose success had always been celebrated while mine had been minimized or overlooked. His recognition that he'd been self-absorbed rather than supportive provided hope that our relationship could evolve beyond the competitive dynamics that had characterized our interactions throughout childhood and early adulthood. "Your networking skills at the wedding were genuinely impressive," I assured him, recognizing that family healing required acknowledging everyone's legitimate strengths rather than simply reversing previous recognition patterns. "James Richardson's business associates were clearly impressed by your conversation abilities and relationship-building potential." "Maybe," Tyler replied, "but building actual business relationships and generating measurable results is much more impressive than charming people at social events. What you've accomplished with Richardson Industries and your other clients represents real professional achievement." The Manufacturing Association presentation that James Richardson had mentioned became reality 3 months after the holiday gathering, providing an opportunity to showcase Elevate Digital Solutions' strategic approach to an audience of established business leaders who faced similar digital marketing challenges. The presentation was professionally rewarding and generated multiple client prospects, but more importantly, it represented external validation of my expertise from industry leaders whose opinions carried significant credibility. "Sarah Martinez has achieved the kind of measurable business transformation that every manufacturing company should be pursuing," James Richardson told the association members when introducing my presentation. "Her strategic approach to digital marketing integration has generated results that exceed anything we've experienced with traditional agency relationships." As I stood before an audience of successful business leaders presenting case studies and strategic frameworks that had generated dramatic client results, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment of professional recognition. The daughter who had been deemed too risky for family investment had built a business that was now being celebrated by industry leaders and generating opportunities that extended far beyond anything I'd projected in my original business plan. The success wasn't just professional. Family relationships had evolved in ways that acknowledged everyone's legitimate capabilities, while recognizing the support patterns that had created unnecessary competition and resentment. My parents had learned to celebrate my achievements with the same enthusiasm they'd always shown for Tyler's potential, while Tyler had developed genuine appreciation for accomplishments that he'd previously overlooked or undervalued. 6 months after the holiday gathering that had changed everything, Elevate Digital Solutions was fielding client inquiries from throughout the Midwest, employing 8 full-time staff members, and generating revenue that exceeded my most optimistic projections from the original business plan that my parents had deemed too risky to support. The business success had attracted attention from larger agencies interested in partnership opportunities and private equity firms curious about acquisition possibilities. But more than financial achievement, I had finally received the kind of family recognition and professional acknowledgement that had always seemed to flow naturally toward Tyler, while remaining elusive for my own accomplishments. James Richardson's intervention at the holiday gathering had provided external validation that forced everyone to recognize capabilities that had been consistently undervalued within family dynamics. The experience had taught me that sometimes the most satisfying vindication comes not from proving doubters wrong, but from having those doubters finally recognize what had been there all along. My parents hadn't failed to support my business because they lacked faith in my capabilities. They had failed to support it because they hadn't understood what those capabilities could achieve when properly applied and externally validated. As I reflected on the transformation that had occurred in both my professional life and family relationships, I realized that the greatest gift James Richardson had provided wasn't the business success or the industry recognition, but the opportunity for my family to see me clearly for the first time. The helpful sister who had served drinks at Tyler's wedding had always been the successful entrepreneur who built Elevate Digital Solutions. It had just taken external perspective for everyone else to recognize what had been visible all along. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.